Welcome to the lesson on the present subjunctive mood. First, it's important to understand what the present subjunctive is. And the first thing to identify is that the present subjunctive can only be used in a complex sentence. These exist in English, the subjunctive mood rather exists in English, but the problem is because we don't actually conjugate verbs and give them different endings in English, it's hard to identify when the subjunctive is being used and when the indicative or good old present tense is being used. Spanish makes it a little bit easier because we have those different verb endings. So, the subjunctive, it's used in complex sentences where we have two clauses, clause 1 and clause 2, that are joined together by a conjunction, K. Now, this first clause is going to identify some information for us. We're going to look here in this part of the complex sentence to see if we have any of these four entities: command, opinion, doubt, or emotion. Because if clause 1 has any of these four, well then verb number 2 is going to be in the subjunctive. If we don't have command, opinion, doubt, and emotion, well then verb number 2 is going to be good old present tense that we learned in Spanish 1. So let's look at some examples. Here we have some sentences in English. He plays soccer. He plays soccer. Well, the one on the left is an indicative or good old Spanish 1 sentence. The one on the right is a subjunctive sentence. And the only reason why it's a subjunctive sentence is because I added in an opinion. It is great. Now let's take a look at it down here in the Spanish version. Él juega fútbol. We learned that in Spanish 1. But as soon as I put es excelente que in front of it, I had to change juega to juegue. Es excelente que él juegue fútbol. The same thing happens with we win the game. I have we win the game on the subjunctive side, but because I've added this element of doubt, it is unlikely that we win the game, I have to change the conjugation in Spanish. Now, these English sentences correctly portray the indicative and subjunctive mood. We just don't realize we're using them because the translation's the same. So let's look at the Spanish version down here. Okay, nosotros ganamos el partido. We learned that in Spanish 1, how to form that sentence. But as soon as I put es improbable que in front of it, well, I've made ganamos turn to ganemos el partido. All right, so what does this mean for us? Well, right now, we're going to focus in on conjugation. And for conjugation, we're going to break this into 3 quizzes. Quiz number 1 is going to be over regular subjunctive verbs. And these are pretty easy to form, seeing as we've done these steps with commands in the past. Our first step is to put the verb into the yo form. Then we drop the O, and then we flip all of the endings. So an AR verb now ends in A, es, a, hemos, es, en. And an ER-IR verb ends in a, as, a, amos, ais, an. And by hitting this yo form, we are able to catch any irregulars, any yogo verbs, and any stem changers. So that yo form is really important. And we've made those steps before, except now we have 6 different conjugation endings that are based on the subjects presented to us. Now, of course, Spanish always has to have irregulars, and this is where we'll move into quiz number 2, are the irregulars. Now, these irregulars we've seen before when dealing with commands. We've dealt with dishes. We've dealt with car, gar, zar, and her, hier verbs. Now, instead of dar only having a couple of conjugations like des, de, or den, we have 6 different versions based upon the subjects. Yo de, tú des, él de, nosotros demos, vosotros deis, ellos den. Here we've seen vayas, vaya, and vayan. Well, now we have the whole conjugation slew. Vaya, vayas, vaya, vayamos, vayis, vayan. The same with the ser, sea, 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 seamos, seais, sean. We're adding to the conjugations that we've already learned. Now, with car, gar, zar, her, and hier verbs, we've learned that they need to maintain a sound. And the same applies in the subjunctive, because when we put it into the yo form and we flip, we're going to eliminate the sound unless we're careful to keep the qu for car verbs, the gu for gar verbs, the ce for zar verbs, and the ja for her, hier verbs. These little phonetic changes or spelling changes here will help maintain the soft or hard sounds that the verb originally possessed. And now we just keep them all the way through every conjugation. Okay, Stemchangers are where the subjunctive gets a little bit difficult. Stemchangers have a lot of rules associated with them. We have to remember that in the present tense, most Stemchangers changed everywhere but nosotros and vosotros. And because of that, we called them boot verbs. Well, the same happens in the subjunctive. We change all of the vowels, E to IE, E to I, O to UE, U to UE, within the actual boot, but we also flip all of the endings. That means in nosotros and vosotros, we will not vowel change, but we will flip the ending. We always flip the ending, even if we don't vowel change. Okay, so how does this get more complicated than the normal present tense? Well, let's talk about IR verbs. IR verbs follow the same rules that we just identified. In the boot, an IR verb will change E to IE, E to I, O to UE, U to UE. They will also flip all endings. But what happens is in the nosotros and vosotros form, they also vowel change. Okay, so they also vowel change. But this time, we can only change E to I or O to U. So not only will an IR verb have a boot change, it will also have a nosotros, vosotros change here. So this is easier to understand when you see some examples. So let's look at these stem changing verbs. Cerrar. We know cerrar is an E to IE verb. So I have changed the E to IE in yo, tú, él, and ellos, just like I did in the present tense. But because this is subjunctive, I've taken this AR verb and I've flipped all of the endings. Es, hemos, eis, en. And I did not do any vowel changes in nosotros, vosotros, because it's a boot verb. Let's look at volver, which is an ER verb. I flipped every ending, a, as, a, amos, ais, an, and I took the O and made it a UE everywhere but nosotros, vosotros. Vuelva, vuelvas, vuelva, vuelvan. I did not vowel change in nosotros or vosotros, but I still flipped the ending, volvamos, volváis. Okay. Now let's look at IR verbs. Preferir is an E to IE verb. So, and it's an IR verb, so I flipped a, as, a, amos, ais, an. I also made the IE change within the boot. But because it's an IR verb, it's going to be E to I, in the nosotros, vosotros conjugation. So notice you have an I, prefiramos, prefiráis. The same thing happens to servir, except that it's E to I all the way through. Dormir is our next best example of how stem changers are a little tricky. We know dormir to be O to UE, and that happens in yo, tú, él, ella, usted, ellos, ellas, and ustedes. But something odd happens in the nosotros, vosotros. It becomes O to U. All endings are still flipped, and the stem change happens in the boot, but because it's an IR verb, it undergoes a special nosotros, vosotros stem change. And that's why stem changers are going to be step 3 to conjugating in the subjunctive. Have a great day. See you in class.